This Trita Parsi is speaking to us from Washington, D.C. He's the Executive Vice President of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thank you for speaking to us here on the programme. Now, Donald Trump earlier warned of the calm before the storm. What's your reading into his latest warnings and also the messaging you're getting from all of this? Is he likely to follow through, do you think?
I think the president is seriously considering taking additional military action. It is in and of itself a clear indication that despite the rhetoric coming from the administration, they recognize that not only was the previous war a failure, but also the blockade of the blockade, which was supposed to break the Iranians and avoid this scenario, was also a failure. There is a reality right now in which on both sides there are views that increasingly are becoming dominant, in which both sides believe that one more round of fighting will give them the benefits, the advantage in future negotiations. Particularly on the Iranian side, even though I don't think they're looking for it, those who made that argument earlier on believe that they were proven right, given how this war has been conducted, and as a result are very bullish right now.
Right, that's an interesting perspective, especially when you say when it comes to Iran. Now, Donald Trump, wants Iran to make a deal, he says, on his terms, really. He's given it time, but is it enough time? And is his expectation realistic in the first place within that time frame?
I don't think time necessarily is the main problem. The main problem is that both sides, or at least on the American side, there is a very strong desire to make sure that any deal, even if it entails significant American concessions, are perceived by the world as the Iranians caving to the U.S. side, particularly caving to Trump himself. It is understandable that both sides want to have a narrative of victory. The problem, I think, is that from Trump's perspective, he is trying to have a narrative of victory that negates the other side's narrative of victory. And that's part of the reason why they're not capable of breaking the deadlock, because both of them have a strong need of making sure that they look as if they came out of this as a winner.
Right. So speaking of caving in and looks, as you say, on who's winning in all of this, you know, a big factor in this war, of course, is Israel. Israel started this war alongside the US. Netanyahu, very much the prime minister there, cares a lot about public opinion and showing that he has been able to get rid of Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and what he believes is an existential threat to Israel, which, of course, is Iran. Now, they have spoken, Trump and Netanyahu. How much of an influence and how much caving in will Trump be doing for Netanyahu?
Undoubtedly, Prime Minister Netanyahu has played an absolutely critical role in all of this. There would not have been a war had it not been for the pressure that he put on President. Of course, there wouldn't have been a war if President had not made that decision. But nevertheless, Netanyahu was a critical factor in all of this in the beginning. He continues to be so. The Israelis have made it absolutely clear their preference is a return to war. They were not in favor of the ceasefire in the first place. They want the United States to go in much harder and longer. There also appears now to be a much more explicit view in the Emirates, in the UAE, in favor of more war as well. And this is creating a significant split within the GCC itself, in which many countries, Qatar, for instance, Oman, are dead set against this war. They work very hard to prevent it, and they want to end it as quickly as possible, whereas the Emirates is taking Israel's side and is seeking to have renewed warfare.
And I will come to the UAE in a moment that you just mentioned there in the Gulf countries. But, we know that there are midterm elections coming up in the US, but also elections in Israel. Do we think that Netanyahu, it works in his favor to continue this war with Iran?
Absolutely, because the alternative would be that there actually would be a breakthrough in the negotiations. And that breakthrough undoubtedly would entail sanctions relief from the U.S. side to Iran. This would be a huge blow to Netanyahu. But because of the elections, he would likely be very limited in his ability to criticize the United States and Trump, because Trump remains a very, very popular figure inside of Israel. So Netanyahu would not be able to afford to have that confrontation with Trump publicly. But if there is renewed warfare, then he doesn't have to worry about a scenario in which the U.S. lifts sanctions on Iran. So clearly the elections is, as always, a very significant part of Netanyahu's calculation here.
Right, and speaking of calculation, going back to what you were saying there about the Gulf countries, we know that there have been drones that have targeted the UAE and Saudi earlier. They say they have a right to retaliate. One of those drones was near a nuclear plant in the UAE. What is the calculus for the Gulf states right now? And will Trump take any of that into consideration? We know that the UAE, for example, seems to have been in favor of doing something about it, perhaps in terms of attacking Iran.
So the Emiratis most likely already have been involved in attacks on Iranian soil. The Israelis had reported it early on. The Emiratis denied it, but increasingly appears that that already has happened. I don't think that was in the beginning of the war. It most likely came later at a time when the Emiratis themselves already had been attacked by the Iranians. I think the Emirati calculation is very similar to that of the Israelis. The Emiratis and the Israelis are very close right now. They're strategic partners. They refer to each other as such as a result of the Abraham Accords. And as a result, they believe that essentially this war has to come to a winning conclusion. And that means that Iran is completely defeated and that the Islamic Republic more or less is toppled. This is what they hope to achieve, but I don't think many other countries in the region believe that it is achievable, mindful of the fact that the United States more or less gave everything it had and did not achieve any of these strategic objectives in the first round of the war. And there's very little to suggest that the second round of war will make a significant deviation from that.
And still not clear, of course, from other GCC countries whether they would be in favour of going back to war. Now, just shifting before we go, Trita Parsi, please, Iran's military has warned of surprising methods, is what it's called it, of warfare if attacked again. Well, we know they've had enough time to recalibrate during this hiatus when it comes to the ceasefire.
Yes, and I think, again, we see over and over again that a lot of the statements coming out of the Pentagon about how much damage they inflicted on Iran have proven to be false. The Iranians retain far stronger capabilities than they did, according to the Pentagon. And this is according to U.S. intelligence itself that is leaking information that shows that a significant amount of Iran's missile capabilities have either been restored or were never fully damaged in the first place. I think the Iranian calculation is that if there is renewed warfare, just as much as they believe that the United States is going to try to go even harder at it in the hope of being able to turn the tables in this war, the Iranians will likely retaliate much, much harder this time around than they did in the previous time. And the previous time was pretty hard in and of itself. So I think, if there is a renewed warfare, it's going to be quite devastating for the region as a whole, and of course for the global economy that already has suffered tremendously from this war.
Of course. Thank you very much for your thoughts speaking to us here at Al Jazeera. Trita Parsi from the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft in Washington, D.C.